Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Chop It Up with attorney Linda Bernard. It's a real pleasure to be with you today because this has been a hot week in the news. You're watching Chop It Up on WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the entire world. You can watch us, listen to us, subscribe, comment on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, all of the major social media platforms. So thank you for tuning in today. Before I bring my guest on, I want to talk about a little bit about a few of the hot topics of today, and maybe I'll re-examine them with him as well. But of course, the hottest of all hot topics is what the Supreme Court has done with respect to the 50-year precedent decision of Roe v. Wade. That decision now that said that a woman had a right to have an abortion, although it was becoming more and more limited. It was based on the gestation of the fetus, how big the fetus was, etc. It's essentially gave women in every state a right to an abortion. However, the states could at the same time limit that. As you know, like in Mississippi and Texas and so forth, you can't have an abortion after 6 weeks, which is actually the first time you can hear a fetal heartbeat. So, I mean, the window was narrowing in many states. Only a few states had legislation that actually allow for abortion, and I'll tell you about those in a minute. But the Supreme Court has now emphatically said there is no, quote, constitutional right to an abortion. That's important. They didn't say that a woman didn't have a right to have an abortion. They said there was no constitutional right to have an abortion. And they left the decision regarding abortion rights up to individual states. That's a very, because of the nature of society these days, we're flying everywhere, driving everywhere. Many people work in different states and live in one state and work in another state. This makes it very problematic for a woman to have an abortion. But because many states have laws on the books that in fact prohibit abortion. Let me give you an example of what I'm speaking about. The states that currently prohibit abortion with a 6-week ban include Louisiana, Georgia, Idaho, Kentucky, Mississippi, North Dakota, Ohio, our sister state, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Texas. They all prohibit abortion after 6 weeks. That means that abortion is still legal in those states, but their 6-week ban can and is enforced. The states with an 8-week ban include Iowa and several others. Florida, which is a state that many people go to routinely, has a 15-week ban. That was signed in April of this year on abortion. Mississippi's actually is a 15-week ban, along with Louisiana and Kentucky. So these are states that have already limited the rights to abortion. Now your question might be, what about Michigan? Well, Michigan has a 31 bill on the books that bans all abortions. Under Roe v. Wade, you could still get an abortion in Michigan, up to a certain period, until I think around close to 4 to 5, 6 months actually. But now, because the court had interpreted Roe v. Wade to supersede, of course, the state law, the 1931 state law. But now that Roe v. Wade has been overturned, the state statute from 1931 that prohibits all abortions for women, irrespective of the reason. It could be that you can't save her life. You can't abort when there's been a rape or incest. Come on in, Curtis Smith. We're talking about Roe v. Wade. And ladies and gentlemen, we've been joined by Mr. Curtis Smith, a a community advocate and leader, as well as a urban planner of national note. Hi, Curtis. How are you?
How you doing, Attorney Linda Bernard?
Pretty good. We're talking a little bit about the abortion situation and certainly Roe v. Wade. Before I finish with what I was saying, what's your take on the decision as you understand it?
So my take on the decision is I'm not surprised. This has been an important agenda item for a segment of the country for a long time.
50 years. Since Roe v. Wade, there's been continuous right to life protests, continuous right to life, legislation proposed in various states.
Exactly.
As I was just going over the state situation.
And so the appointment of judges that reflect the views of those folks who are right to life has been methodical. It's been systematic, and it's been continuous of electing or appointing those type of individuals. So the decision that was rendered by the Supreme Court this week was not surprising, and I think folks, it's going to have it's going to have several effects afterwards. I think on the one hand, certainly it takes away a lot of the talking points for Republicans who use that topic issue as a subject matter for which they ran on local and national, mainly national politics. And so it'll be interesting to see how that changes.
Let me ask you your perspective, both as a man and as an African American man. They may be different. As a male, you may feel one way, but how do you feel this impacts the African American community? But as a man first.
Well, as a man, I don't know if it affects me differently as a man or a human being, and also because to some degree those are intertwined, and I guess also being African American. Well, I certainly support a woman's decision to choose what's best for her body. Certainly, ascribing to the scientific terms about. I don't know the number of the dates that
months
that abortion can happen. And as an African American, that's something I'm not sure how much of an issue that was within the African American community.
Well, it is a big issue because the majority of people that have abortions are people of color. And unfortunately, that just happens to be the case.
So that's the first time I've heard that fact. And
poor. They're either poor or African American. It's an economic issue in many respects.
Wow, it'd be interesting to figure out where that data came from.
Well, I can show it to you, but there's no question about it. And the very people who say no abortion, although I'll come back to the issue of abortion in a minute, are the very same people who want to cut welfare, food stamps, aid to dependent children, all these kinds of things. I mean, the people who are most affected by this are lower to middle income people, because people, your wife, your daughter, whatever, she can just go to a state. She can go to California. She can go wherever she wants to go, and have the procedure. But if you don't have that flexibility, and if you don't have money, then you can't go. Although. Well, go ahead. Make your point.
I was also going to say that one of the if we go back in time in the history of this important topic, one of the reasons I believe that the original Roe v. Wade decision was rendered was that there were a lot of women who were either hurt or killed having improper procedures.
That's also true.
And we are concerned.
Coat hanger procedures are what they refer to as, right?
And then the other thing is. There are cases when the termination of pregnancy is the route to go based on health of the mother or sexual assault, either by a stranger or a family member, or just period rape. And so those are very difficult subject matters to have to endure, and so it's a complicated.
But see, what I'm saying situation. To you. is that fundamentally, it is really an economic issue. Because let me give you an example. These
Sure.
are the companies which immediately announced that they would provide for transportation for an employee of theirs who wanted to get an abortion, pay the transportation costs. See, that's what I'm saying. If it's legal in Ohio, if it's illegal, it's very illegal in Ohio, but it's legal in Cali, then just go to California. It's a 4-hour plane ride. You don't feel well for a day, and then you come back. And these companies are the ones that have said they would do it. Paramount Pictures, Global Paramount, the international Paramount, Citibank, Lyft, Uber, Dick's Sporting Goods, Levi's out of San Francisco, Alaska Airlines, Nike, Warner Brothers, J.P. Morgan, which shocked me because J.P. Morgan owns Chase, as you know, Microsoft, of course, Disney Corporation, Paramount. These are companies that will pay for you to go get it. So it's not an issue for you if you can still get it. If and you don't have to spend $1,000, an extra $1,000 to get it. They're not going to pay for the abortion, but they will pay for your transportation
For that medical procedure. It certainly is.
more than anybody. Because I could fly to New York if I wanted. You know what I mean? I just do it. You wouldn't even think about it. You wouldn't even think about it if it was your daughter or your wife.
So, these are very salient situations and conditions and circumstances that need careful evaluation. What I would like to see is the proponents of pro-life, if they were to also put as much compassion, finances into the welfare and the uplifting of the kids who are here. Often we see that schools reduce funding for schools. In fact, I believe the free lunch program that was augmented during the COVID era, and in terms of the situation, is being considered for elimination. And so the children that are here now need our love, they need our support, they need our resources, and frankly, they need our commitment that we will do everything we can to ensure that they have the supports and the resources they need to be productive citizens.
Well, see, I agree with you about that, but it takes 5 years or 4 years or whatever to get to school. And young women who have babies have to deal with, as you know, as a parent, deal with that baby from infancy for life, actually. So this issue of me being able to continue my life or my lifestyle, I'm in school or I'm in medical school or I'm in high school, grade school, middle school, and I'm pregnant and I want to be unpregnant tomorrow. I mean, that's what I tell young women when they tell me, is this, I don't know, am I killing a baby? And I said, well, hold it here. You don't even know if it's going to be a healthy baby. You don't know what kind of baby. You don't even know. It's just, mucus at this point in the womb. The question is, you can be pregnant today and be unpregnant tomorrow. That's a choice. And that's the choice that I think women should have. And I think that's the choice that Michelle Obama commented on this and others and said it was just disgraceful, which it absolutely is. You, as you said earlier, you started your comments by saying women should be able to choose what they want to do with their bodies. Because clearly men would. Clearly, men would not accept something. I mean, if you got a skin, anything happen to you and you want to eliminate it, you're going to eliminate it. You're going to take care of it. You know what I mean? And so that's the only thing that women want to do. The only issue, because this is quote, an abortion, but unless it's a late-term abortion, it's not a fetus. It's not a viable fetus. Let's put it like that.
And so part of the discussion is on what is considered, the point of life. And some folks,
for them, yeah.
Or just in terms of out
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
I tell you, I would certainly, there is one realm where I would like to see the pro-life movement expanded. And that is with pro-life against the death penalty.
Me and you both. You can't be a little bit pregnant. You either are for life or you are against,
Right.
or you are not.
And I just
So
think
it shouldn't
that,
be an exception for the death penalty.
I think if anything, I mean, certainly there are a lot of reasons why the death penalty goes against pro-life. But one of them is that we know that our judicial system is mistake prone, and there are people,
And there's intrinsic racism.
and there's systemic racism within some of the sentencing and the double standard of application of the death penalty. And if one innocent person has been executed, which we know has happened,
Many times.
then the death penalty should be abolished for that reason. If not, also if it's a they call it a torturous, inhumane treatment of someone.
It is, and I agree with you about the analogy with respect to the death penalty. The issues with respect to abortion are though, however, fundamentally different, because to me there isn't right now I'm the only person. You know what I'm trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
And this is another person that you want to create using me, which is a problem. you know. And it goes back to what you said earlier, really, about a woman's right to choose. But I think it's going to be interesting here in Michigan. As you know, we have a 1931 law that's been on the books for some time that prohibits all abortion, whether there's rape, incest. I mean, they have these reasons for it. I don't think we have to have reasons. I mean, I think it's just a choice. I mean, I think it should be. That's why the word pro-choice is so appropriate. I mean, if your daughter is 15 and she's pregnant, and she and you decide she's going to have an abortion, it's your choice. It's just, let's not make it complicated. As I said earlier, you can be, and this is what I tell young women as well. You pregnant today, I'm pregnant tomorrow. Don't let this, is this my baby? Don't even go there, because if you get sidetracked, you won't be able to focus on yourself, your future, your life, what it is you're trying to accomplish, because it's easy to get derailed, as you know, in life from your core goals and responsibilities. Not to mention the fact that children that are raised in a two-parent household where there's a husband and a wife do far better than children generally who are not. And the recent stats, I don't know if you're aware of this, Curtis, indicate that like in the 70s and 80s and so forth, most black families were headed by a man like yourself. They were intact families, husband and wife, children, that kind of thing. And those families were in fact, like your dad, probably my dad, were supported by the man and or woman in that family that were working. You know what I'm trying to say? That the man supported his family. Now, 80% of the, quote, daddies in the household, it really is Uncle Sam. They are supported by welfare, food stamps, Medicaid, Medicare. The government has taken your role. At least this is the party line in black families, that black men are no longer really part of the family and don't support the family. Uncle Sam is the daddy. How do you feel about that?
Well, I haven't seen the statistics, and so that's one part. But just based on the information that you provided, I'm not surprised. I think that the other part of this story is that when those policies that provided aid to families were enacted, maybe in the 70s with the Great Society, as I'm assuming, they also had some provisions in there that funding would be eliminated if there was a male presence.
That was
in the
way
household.
back. That's been 40 years ago. That has not been the case in more than 40 years.
So
all the new babies that you see
So
are affected by that.
I don't know how much of that applies, but there are cases where, for example, if the father had committed a crime, served his time, and the family is receiving federal assistance for housing, that depending on the crime that person committed and how long ago, that family would be ineligible to receive housing subsidy.
If the convicted felon was there, man or woman.
Right. So then that could be a case where a person has served their time, has been released, and wants to unify with his family. but cannot, because if they do, then the whole family's housing becomes insecure.
That is absolutely true.
And so, I think it's important that we look at to see some of the reasons why, if any of these assistance programs are contributing to the absence of one of the other parent.
That's a
in the
very
household.
good point. That's a very, very good point, and one that I hadn't thought of, but it's absolutely true. You cannot be a convicted felon and
And I think it's not so much
reside.
convicted felon; it's certain crimes.
Well, no, it was all convicted felons, but now,
Now it may be certain crimes.
violent crimes. Probably is what we're talking about. You think?
It could be violent crimes. It could be arson.
Oh yeah, that's
Criminal
that's
sexual conduct. And criminal sexual conduct is on the whole sounds terrible, but I work with the homeless population. Public urination could be considered a criminal
That's
sexual
absolutely
conduct.
right. You're a sex
and
offender.
attorney, I'm sure you're familiar with that. And so I think it's probably time to look at some of the programs and the policies to see if it's having an effect of causing families to be apart.
And also look at what we're criminalizing. If you gotta go, and you're waiting on the bus, and you go around the back of a building to urinate or whatever, and you come back out, and then you're arrested.
Well, I can tell you this: having worked for 5 years in community mental health, some of the medications, the side effect is frequent
4 to 5
urination.
times, right? I understand.
And if you are having housing insecurity or homeless, you got to go. You got to go.
I'm glad you mentioned that. But let's talk a little bit about housing. Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Chop It Up with attorney Linda Bernard. My guest is Mr. Curtis Smith, a very well-known University of Michigan man who is an urban planner and has his own company and does a lot of work throughout Michigan and consults obviously throughout the country. But let's go back to this issue of public housing, if you will, and the poor. What do you, this bill, incidentally, in addition to Roe v. Wade yesterday, the country, the United States Senate and House, and the President has said he will sign it, has signed a bill on concerning guns. But that legislation is a little different. It doesn't ban assault weapons, doesn't do any of that, doesn't change the age for people to be able to buy guns. It does. There's a lot of money in it. It's amazing how Congress operates. You go in, as you know, with one set of rules to try to address the issue of gun violence, and you come out. I got to tell you what these appropriations are under this bill for the school, many school provisions, creations of a federal clearinghouse on school safety standards. That's got to be paid for. $1 billion for school improvement programs intended to increase attendance and engagement in schools. $1 billion. $1 billion for safe schools and citizenship education, with $500 million set aside for school-based mental health grants, and another $500 million for grants to mental health professional development, whatever that means. $28 million for school-based trauma support. When these incidents occur, you just go to the federal government. In other words, it has become, and then the mental health provisions in the bill, for $80 million for pediatric rapid care for mental health, $60 million in mental health training for pediatricians, $50 million, like they don't get enough training on mental health issues in medical school, $50 million in grants for school-based mental health through the Children's Health Insurance Program, $150 million for the Suicide Crisis Hotline, $250 million for community mental health providers. So the bill, we started about guns, and now we're all into billions of dollars that supplement the funding of institutions that are already federally and state funded, heavily funded, while we're on the subject. This is supposed to be all about guns. The only thing it said about guns was where is my notes are confused here. This is all abortion stuff. I got hooked up on that, but while I'm looking for that, I'm going to tell you what it says about guns. I do know that there are trigger laws now that would make you can now access the juvenile records of people when they apply for a gun, and they've expanded the time period, the review period for you. Like if you go to get a gun, they're going to want to see if you have a juvenile record and all that stuff, which is because most of these mass killings, of course, have been by young people. But it totally misses the mark, in my opinion. They're heralding it as the greatest legislation in 40 years.
Well, Linda, and I appreciate you bringing me up to date on the specifics in the legislation that has been negotiated by both sides of the aisle in Washington, D.C. As you read it, quite frankly, I am not surprised that this.
It's a pork bill.
Well, let me provide a framework, having just heard this, but also having heard small snippets of different responses to the shootings. There are, one half of probably D.C., in terms of I'm talking about the Congress, believes that gun control is the appropriate response. And then I would say the other half believe that it's not so much about gun control, but it's about, the old saying, guns don't kill people, people kill people.
That is absolutely true.
And also, I believe the minority leader of the Senate had said that the issue, it's a mental health crisis, is what the main focus should be in terms of addressing this gun violence in schools. So if there has been conversation in D.C. about this being an issue of individuals committing crimes on one side, and the other side saying guns being restricted is the answer, then I'm not surprised that you see this legislation to address mental health issues within the confines of school and also pediatric doctors' offices.
Pediatricians are already in order to become an MD or a DO, you have to go through every aspect of medicine, from neurosurgery to OB, everything. You have to go through every single program. So they're already familiar with mental health. For pediatricians, these guys that are committing these crimes, in terms of the mass shootings and all that, they're way beyond the age of pediatricians. Let's face it. They are men. They are young men. You stop seeing a pediatrician when you're about 13, 14.
Well, let me just add some.
And to my knowledge, there haven't been any big murders by people that are 14.
So I did work for 5 years in community mental health.
Oh, great. Thank you.
And so I can provide a perspective, although I'm not a therapist or a medical doctor, but I was in the environment where those types of individuals worked. And I believe what happened under the Affordable Care Act was you started to see the integration of physical health and mental health. And for so long, they operated in separate silos, when in fact there needed to be some integration, because a person, for a couple of reasons. Number one is a person may take behavioral health medication that could adversely impact a physical health condition. Could impact the kidneys, and the behavioral health doctor may not know that the kidneys are in bad shape, and so something like that. The other thing is the integration also involved physical doctors asking more questions about the mental state of their patients, and they ask everyone, "Are you feeling depressed? Have you had thoughts of loneliness?" And I can't remember all the questions, but when I got my physical, there's maybe 5 or 6 questions they ask, and depending on your answer, they may trigger additional questions. So
or referral.
Or referrals. So the body. So this is, and so for a long time, people have bad backs, they have bad elbows, they got bad ankles, knees, eyesight, hearing, and so those are parts of the body. Well, in physical health, there was one part of the body they really didn't touch too much, and that was the mind. And so with this integration, you're looking at more at folks understanding that the brain is an organ, it's a part of the body, it's integral to the rest of the body. And I think your physical doctors, along with your psychiatrists, are working closely together because the whole body works in unison.
Well, I agree with that, but this is a pork bill.
Let me just add one more thing, Attorney Linda Bernard. the pediatrician actually goes on to about 21.
Most of the girls that I know, I don't know about the boys,
So
but I didn't know that. But I mean, most of the girls I know start seeing a woman's doctor after they start to menstruate, which is between 13, 15. I guess 11 in these days now, 11 to 15. But they start to go see a woman's doctor,
and the experience we had was
and because many of them need reproductive stuff. I mean, and many 15-year-olds now have the capsule, the 5-year birth control thing. Even though they say they're not going to be sexually active, parents are being preemptive now.
Well, I just know that in our experience, in my 2 children,
You have girls?
I have a son and a daughter.
Okay.
The pediatrician had said, and we had such a phenomenal pediatrician.
Oh, wonderful.
And I remember the pediatrician saying, well, it's time to go to a general physician.
And they were older.
They were in their 20s.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Because, see, many kids these days are sexually active at 13, 14, 15. I went to a middle school graduation at Fellowship Chapel for 2 weeks ago. And on my mother and my father, I would never have thought those girls were under 13. They had on evening gowns. They had on my mother, split up to the hip for graduation. This is for middle school to go to high school. They're not even in high school yet. Dresses split to the hip, high heels, tiaras, super tight stuff. I mean, it was unbelievable. I said, what is this? I was shocked by the way the girls looked. I would never in a million years have thought not one of them was an 8th grader. Not one girl looked like an 8th grader. Except the kid that I was there for. Her mother she had on a little denim skirt, a little short, little low heels, no spike heels, none of that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, the only thing constant is change. And so...
and you know this.
And so, Attorney Bernard, when I hear situations of the world that we're in, I just always take a moment to say, well, what are the solutions to that? And I just see that graduating class, maybe
8th grade
graduating class, having an opportunity to sit down with Attorney Linda Bernard and share her wisdom.
No, but their parents bought all this stuff. I mean, it was unbelievable. 4-inch heels, 5-inch heels. I'm not making this up. There were some cute girls going across that stage, but none of them looked like 8th graders. I can tell you that. 90% of them didn't. But it is what it is. But my point, I raised that point because of what you said about going to pediatricians. Because kids are much more sexually active and sexually attuned now than ever before. I think because of their phones, etc. And it just is what it is. In the old days, you'd say a boy was mannish. Not at all.
you know what?
But before you go on, let me just say this: You're watching WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. I'm Attorney Linda Bernard. My guest today on Chop It Up is a very prominent gentleman, a very handsome man, as you can see. So I think he knows a lot about life and the world in general. Mr. Curtis Smith, a preeminent urban planner here in southeastern Michigan, quite frankly, and the other parts of the state as well, because you're in Grand Rapids and Detroit.
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead. You were going to make a point.
I was going to make a point my point I was going to make was in terms of promiscuity or sexual activity of young people.
Which brings us back to abortion, which is one of the issues. But go ahead.
And I question whether or not children are more active today than in the past. I think what may be the difference is that we see kids more. We have more opportunity to see more kids through social media, through technology, through all kinds of ways that, let's say, 100 years ago you couldn't see. And I think of in the past that kids got married at 13. Kids got married at 14 and 15 in many parts of this country 100 years ago.
That was 50, 60 years ago.
Sure.
Yeah,
so, but my point I'm trying to make is, if you get married at 14 or 13, then you are sexually active.
Well, you're sexually active. I mean, my point is that now kids are far more sexually active because of this computer, our telephones and TV, than than the generations that you're speaking about, because they didn't have those things, and it's just it's de rigueur. It is accepted, and so that's one of the reasons that I think, and I'm saying this because my niece is an OBGYN, and she just delivered a girl that was 11. She just physically had the baby, versus her parents. I'm sure her parents probably didn't have the money take her to get an abortion. So I'm just saying, kids are more sexually. They really are more sexually active. I mean, when I graduated. I graduated from high school as a virgin. That doesn't happen for the most part now. That was my goal, though, quite frankly, because I didn't want to be pregnant in school. That was the worst to me, for a girl to have to leave school to be pregnant. That was the worst. So that was an easy choice for me. That one. In college, you could cover it up. You know what I mean? You could be one of 30,000 or 50,000 people, so nobody really cares what's happening with you. But in high school, in a small Catholic high school, oh no.
Sure. And I think, to your point, abstinence has many virtues and values that could help a young person to avoid pitfalls and side twists to their career direction of ascending at a certain level.
Well, there's no question about it, but the bottom line is that we are mammals as people, and that even goes back to the Roe v. Wade. I mean, there are three things that we're going to, if we have an IQ of 50, if we just, we couldn't even talk or, can think clearly, there are three things that we're going to do. We're going to eat, we're going to drink, and we're going to fornicate. I mean, the sexual urge has nothing to do with with how smart you are. It's just a natural urge. And it feels good. So therefore, kids are now aware, of course, of birth control stuff and everything. And I think smart parents, quite frankly, I have a very serious discussion early on with girls in particular, because they're the ones who have to bear the burden of the sex. The boys keep it moving, as we both know. Mm-hmm. You can hit it and roll on, but Papa was a rolling stone. But girls need to protect themselves from pregnancy. Both girls and boys need to protect themselves from disease. And all I can say is that if my daughter is pregnant at 15, would be heading straight to the abortion clinic. Because I don't want her dropping out of school. I don't want her to have that burden. That's too much of a burden. Like I said earlier, you're pregnant today, you're unpregnant tomorrow. So you don't even get there. You don't even make that psychological, that sort of I'm a mommy kind of thing. You don't even go there. We're not going there. We're going straight to the place.
And to your point, which is well, said and articulated, that there should be a conversation prior with children, a frank conversation about sex, about understanding the feelings, and also understanding what happens when sex happens between two individuals.
All of that goes out the window when you're kissed passionately for the first time, and you and I both. I mean, it just is what it is.
But so that's only momentarily.
How do I keep her from getting pregnant? Is my key point. And that little thing in her arm that my niece puts in the girl that was 11 that just had the baby, now she has one.
Well, Linda, we are human beings.
She's not going to stop having sex. Sex is not something people stop. They don't stop eating. They don't stop drinking. They don't stop fornicating.
I think they do. I think people understand that there can be risk associated with that.
Oh,
there's disease.
Here we go.
There's, and I think it's worth having the conversation with young people.
Oh, I agree with that.
To make decisions, and that's why we're human beings, because we can think one thing but act another way.
I agree with that.
Now, the challenges happen when the person thinks and can't control the thinks and urges and acts on it. That's the issue of mental health.
That's called life,
Well, that's called.
When the girls saw you, Curtis, when you were young, and even now, you're a very attractive guy. I mean, it just is what it is. There are attractions. Things happen. I mean, it doesn't take a lot for things to happen, as we both know. So therefore, I just really do believe in preemptive, in preventative measures, which includes the birth control. And of course, if in fact that didn't work, or you got carried away, that one night, whatever it is, that's what abortions are for, and that's what parents
Well,
are
Linda, I
for.
think
Unless you
also,
want to take care of a baby of a 15-year-old, but your kids are older. But if you had a new baby, if you had a new wife, you have a new baby. So what else is new?
well, and conversation is also part of that preemptive.
I agree.
So,
I agree, but when you're looking at somebody that's like the athletes and so forth that are just, or you or anybody that looks like, nah, that goes out the window. Oh, he's so cute, he's so cute. But back to the point, we're off the point.
all right.
Okay, but in terms of this legislation,
Mm-hmm.
as you can see, the majority of the bill related to things like money, and I agree with you for purposes about mental health issues. But
Absolutely.
I'm not sure where all of that really falls. Quite frankly, I'm not sure. I mean, you have to help me with this,
Sure.
because I mean the police department now. I'm a police commissioner, as you know. We have a huge initiative for mental health
Sure.
and intervention and so forth in various situations and so forth, in order to try to de-escalate situations and deal with people. Many people are having quote a mental health crisis because our chief actually has a degree in mental health. That's what he has his master's degree in, and so he's very interested in how people make choices, bad choices he calls them, as well as the mental health issues that they have and that they're brought up with. So this is an issue, but in terms of gun legislation, this the emphasis on mental health is, I think, very important. I mean, if you can spot people ahead of time, then that makes sense. But it still has. But as we said earlier, I mean, there are there are 3 guns for every 1 American. So there are 350 million Americans. So there's a billion guns in the country, all kinds of guns and weapons, and we like our guns. We're not going to give our guns up. That's the prescription. I mean, black or white people don't want to give up their guns. It doesn't matter. And so it's not going to it's not going to change that dynamic. What I feel the legislation misses, when you look at, if you do an analytical program, which is what your specialty is, on the gun, on the things that have happened, the mass shootings and so forth. And we just did a profile. And that profile would probably indicate that most mass shootings are by young males under 21, white, principally, vast majority. And we start to dissect looking at those people and what did it. To me, in other words, a more targeted approach in terms of an analysis needs to be done to address gun safety, because the majority of those 350 million Americans that have guns, they're okay. Let's face it. So you can't, put a Band-Aid. They don't need any help. They practice gun safety. They take care of their business, etc. But this group of people who have, you said earlier, and I think you were saying, mental health issues, who have access to guns, and or people who are psychotic or have some sort of mental. But that's the population. 99% of the people have had guns their whole life and never even committed a crime.
So I think, Linda, one of the points of this legislation and all these components is that it's difficult, is to address the individual who may develop a mental state where they feel that the only answer is to shoot and kill kids. And I think you have to...
Or their coworkers.
Or their coworkers. But I think this legislation is mainly around schools.
Yeah, schools. Well, schools and then, school. Yeah, but it's really.
And I think you have to kind of cast a broad net and touch the minds and the hearts and the lives of young people, so that if you do find someone that has some aspirations, or not aspirations, not the right word, has thoughts of violence, then you can have a intervention early on. And so I think that's what this legislation is doing, is helping to identify those folks so they can get the help they need to be able to process whatever issues they have on their mind, and to get the medication or therapy or whatever is prescribed to best alleviate those urges to hurt other people.
Well, they're expanding the what it takes now in terms of the background checks. And you now can access their juvenile records. So if I carried a gun and I was stopped with a gun when I was 16, and now I'm on a gun permit and I'm 18, then that could affect that application.
Sure.
It's also affected by whether or not you have a domestic violence, any kind of conviction, which we know is and as you said earlier, criminal sexual conduct. I mean, in other words, your history comes into it, but most of that history, one, wouldn't have been applicable to the cases that we've seen where there were mass shootings, as we both know, and it just really meant to penalize many Americans who had, for example, one bad night, where they roughed up their girlfriend or assaulted their girlfriend. So now they have a PPO or had a PPO when they were 18 or 17 or 19, and now they're 22 or business owners. A business owner was just saying this to me, and he can't get a gun, even though he has a business. Or if he has a previous felony. I mean, I think we need a much more targeted, much more analytical approach to the problem, so we can narrow the focus and then target through funding those people that we have this issue or could have an issue.
Linda, I think Attorney Linda Bernard.
Incidentally, you're watching WJZZ. Chop It Up with Attorney Linda Bernard on the coolest station in the entire world, WJZZ Cool TV. You can watch us, listen to us, subscribe to us on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, all the social media platforms. My guest is Mr. Curtis Smith, a extraordinarily well-known and renowned urban planner, and obviously a thinker and person who has great experience with mental health as well as community issues. Go ahead, Curtis.
Thank you, Attorney Bernard. And I was saying that this legislation or these programs as a part of the legislation that you are just highlighted are a first step in addressing some serious and salient concerns. What's significant is that I believe this is the first gun reform legislation in 40 years, maybe?
30 years.
30 years. And so,
if you want to call it gun reform, I don't see it as gun reform.
Or legislation to address gun violence issues. And I think we, now, if I'm not mistaken, it passed the Senate.
It's already passed, and it passed the House too. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, by many of the Republicans in the House approved it. It's going to the president's office right now. But right now, $1.5 billion for school improvement programs intended to increase attendance and engagement.
I think that's phenomenal. That's great.
I'm not as concerned about that as I am about the fact that I'm not sure things are being taught. When I look at Detroit public schools, and I just had a guest on, and his position was, well, the legislature in Michigan just gave $500 million for school infrastructure. I said, Detroit has less than 50,000 students in public school. 50,000. We don't need bricks and mortar. I would rather, if I had the money to give each kid their own tutor in every single subject, that school could even be individualized like that, because we're missing the mark on my mother and my father. I was at Mumford 3 weeks ago registering kids to vote, and if I saw a textbook, that wall just moved. Not one.
Well,
wait a minute. I'm in the student hall, the big union hall where everybody sits out in the middle, and all that. Not a single book. Now, many of them had some laptops and stuff like that. They had a notebook. But that's not school. School is real. We've stopped teaching. And my problem, and if you don't believe it, you can look at the scores for Detroit kids. They are lower than Mississippi's.
Okay.
So this emphasis on, quote, the school is not the issue. The issue is the teaching and the learning. The school is there to teach people. My father graduated from a one-room schoolhouse in Natchez, Mississippi. All 12 grades in one room. He has an appreciation for art, literature, poetry. Only listened to classical music. Extraordinarily articulate. In a one-room schoolhouse. So the question becomes, what are we doing wrong? This throwing money at school improvement programs to increase attendance and engagement, duh, it's mandatory that you go to school. It's illegal if you don't. The question becomes, what happens to you when you go to school? Do you read? Do you learn reading, writing, arithmetic, geography, world affairs? That's the question, and that's where we're dropping the ball, and you know it. All you gotta do is ask any of our high school graduates, many of them, to write a paragraph on Mother's Day, and see if it's articulate, see if it's well written, see if it's thoughtful. See on Mother's Day. Just try it. Ask a kid. Ask 10 kids. Write a paragraph on Mother's Day or Father's Day.
In response to what you have just stated, let me share a few things. To the textbooks, you're right. You didn't see a lot of textbooks. A lot of the learning is done electronically.
That's ridiculous. Because that means if I don't have a plug, I can't learn. The good part about a book is that I can read it outdoors. Sunlight is all I need. If there's a power interruption, if my computer fails, if I get a virus, then I can't learn. But guess what? If I got a book, I can learn on the subway, on the bus, in the park, in the backyard, on the front porch, sitting at a cafeteria counter.
Well, that's true. And it's not just high schools that you're not going to see as many textbooks, but even colleges.
I didn't say not as many. I understand that.
Well, even any. And I think the way of learning going forward is through digital and electronic purposes.
The way of learning is through teaching.
Well, I myself, if you come to my house, you won't see any books. And that's because I have a Kindle. And I have hundreds of books on my Kindle.
Okay.
And I read on my Kindle. And I no longer buy books. I do a little bit when they're not available electronically. But that is the way that folks are reading nowadays. The other point you made about school engagement. Let me say this. Detroit Public Schools have a challenge in front of them to educate the kids. Oftentimes, those challenges are issues that aren't necessarily around the school, but what happens in the household before the kids come to school.
Absolutely, absolutely. I've always said we need $500 million in boarding schools. We don't where kids have structure. Kids learn from structure.
So let me just say this: if the kid is in school, there's an opportunity that the kid could be affected in a positive way, and get a good education. It's not 100% sure, but there's a chance. If the kid is not in school, then the chances of getting that education are way lower.
I agree.
And the kid will get an education.
That's correct.
But it's the kind of education that we don't want that children
in the
to have.
streets, right.
It'll be the PhD in the streets.
Mm-hmm.
And so this legislation is attempting to get kids back into the building so that there's a higher probability that they will get good instruction.
Do you know how to get kids back in the building?
How do you get kids back in the building?
You do it either by, in my opinion, by either having boarding schools where they have structure, they get up at a certain time, they eat, they school, their recreation, there's da-da-da. Kids learn through structure, and because most households are probably one-parent households now, at least in our community. So therefore, it's not getting them to come to school. It's setting a whole structure where it's mandatory. Where you go pick up a parent if their kid is not in school. It's just that simple. If there's no enforcement, then obviously there is no rule. There certainly is no compliance. It is illegal not to go to school. My issue is what happens when they get to school. I'm not comfortable with what's happening when they get there.
But Linda, you're more comfortable with them being in the school than not being in the school.
The bottom line is they have to be in the school.
Well, but you're more comfortable with them in the school than not being in the school.
I know, but the incentive is that your parent is going to jail.
So then, in terms of, once we get them in the building, Detroit has a aging infrastructure. The schools.
Harvard is 500 years old. That doesn't mean anything. You can upgrade an infrastructure.
But also Harvard has an endowment of several
billions.
$billions. And so they have the funding to do the preventative maintenance and the constant maintenance so their buildings.
Did you hear that? I just said we have 50,000 students. That would be, two high school, 25,000 per student. I mean, The issue is the instruction. It's not the building. I just told you my dad had a one room schoolhouse.
Well,
Duh. But he was there to learn, and his parents made him, and the teachers taught.
it has to be both are together. If you want to have
Where did your kids go to school?
So well, let me ask you this: your dad was in a one-room
Schoolhouse in
and did
Mississippi.
well. Okay, well,
All of them did.
But let me ask you this question: out of his graduating class, how did they all fare?
They did well.
But we don't know that, Linda.
I'm not making it. There was a different structure. There was parental control. There were academic. I mean, kids wanted to learn. Being a student was important, and to be a student. I mean, just you got to think about the culture at that time. Black people were trying really hard to be, quote, show that they were equal or a smart ass. I mean, just think of that generation.
So
You know exactly what I'm saying, but
I do believe that in 500 million across the whole country is not a lot of money.
I said, wait a minute.
So it's a start.
No, it was 500 million in Michigan.
Well, in Michigan.
Okay.
And so
Okay. Where did your kids go to school? Then I got to close because we got to.
Okay, my kids went to Detroit Renaissance.
Okay, so your kids went to one of the two elite high schools in the city of Detroit, which graduates some academic scholars. I rest my case.
And which was the beneficiary of that $1 billion bond money.
Yeah.
That went from the old Renaissance to the new Renaissance, which was nicer.
Well, the bond money was part of it, but really it's the instructional technology. As I said, you can learn anywhere if you have light.
You can, okay, but you can learn better in a nice environment.
I'm not so sure about that. That hasn't proved true in the New Mumford High School or any of the others that are all brand new and shiny. But anyway,
we haven't seen the data.
Thank you for joining us on Chop It Up today with attorney Linda Bernard. My guest is Mr. Curtis Smith. As you can see, not only an urban planner and developer, but a clear thinker who only does his reading on Kindle. So I pray that he will always have electricity.